Hey guys, Edward here from Edward79, the Mixed Content Creator. Now, if you've seen my ranking metals from lowest to highest melting point part 1 video, then you know this is an ongoing series. I ranked 10 metals in that video, so today we're going to be ranking 10 more in this video. So without further ado, let's get to the ranks. First up in part 2 is Tellurium. Tellurium is actually toxic, although nowhere near as toxic as cadmium or lead. But despite its toxicity, tellurium is still a very valuable metal, and the fourth rarest non-radioactive metal on Earth, with it only occurring at 0.001 parts per million in the Earth's crust. That's rarer than platinum, with 0.003 parts per million, gold with 0.0011 parts per million, and silver with 0.07 parts per million. Tellurium is actually the last metal on this list with a melting point below 1000 degrees Fahrenheit, or 537.778 Celsius, with a melting point of 841.1 degrees Fahrenheit, or 44.9 degrees Celsius. Next up on this list is antimony. Unlike many of the metals on this list, antimony is considered a metalloid, which is basically a substance that blurs the line between metals and non-metals on the periodic table. Other metalloids include boron, silicon, germanium, arsenic, and the previously mentioned metalloid tellurium. Although it's commonly alloyed with lead and tin to improve strength and durability, copper is another metal that antimony is oftentimes alloyed with. It's also the 63rd most abundant element on Earth, occurring anywhere from 0.2 to 0.5 parts per million in the crust, actually making it rarer than any of the rare earth metals except promethium. Antimony is the first metal on this list with a melting point surpassing 1000 degrees Fahrenheit, or 537.778 Celsius, with a melting point of 1167 degrees Fahrenheit, or 630.6 degrees Celsius. Coming up after antimony is magnesium. Just like other alkali metals, magnesium only occurs naturally in combination with other elements, and it never occurs pure in nature. And unlike most other alkali metals, such as the violently reactive rubidium and cesium, magnesium isn't very reactive, with the only reaction happening is oxidation forming a coat of magnesium oxide, protecting the metal from further corrosion and oxidation damage. Pure magnesium has a medium-level melting point, melting at 1202 degrees Fahrenheit, or 650 degrees Celsius. Next up on this list is aluminum. If you know one thing about aluminum, it's that compared to other metals, it's everywhere, occurring at a whopping 270,000 parts per million in the Earth's crust, making it the third most common element in Earth's crust behind silicon and oxygen. It's lightweight, soft, malleable, and is used in tons of different applications, including cans, kitchen utensils, window frames, foils, airplane parts, and even beer kegs. And I would be a criminal if I didn't mention, well, I probably already mentioned this already, but aluminum foil. Aluminum's melting point isn't far off from antimony's, with a melting point of 1221 degrees Fahrenheit, or 660.3 degrees Celsius. Coming up next is another notoriously toxic element on the periodic table, arsenic. Its toxicity is pretty hard to exaggerate, and it can even kill you in large enough amounts, which, let's be real, isn't that much. And believe it or not, back in the days, a compound called cupric hydrogen arsenic was used as a green dye for literally everything, from candy and toys to soap and clothing. Thankfully, cupric hydrogen arsenic is now outlawed, but rice still has it. Yes, rice. More specifically, rice grows rice that's grown in former cotton fields that have been sprayed with arsenic, as back when those fields were growing cotton, arsenic was a widespread pesticide. Arsenic has a medium level melting point, melting at 1,502 degrees Fahrenheit or 816.8 degrees Celsius. Next on this list is the first alloy on this list, brass. This metal is what you'd call an alloy, a metal that is made by mixing two or more metals together, in this case copper and zinc. But despite the two metals not being brass colored, brass is golden yellow, and it's actually quite easy to confuse for gold if you don't have trained eyes. It's also one of the most versatile metals out there, being used for so many applications that the amount of things brass is used for is described as seemingly endless. Brass has a melting point in between that of zinc and copper, melting at 1,710 degrees Fahrenheit or 930 degrees Celsius. Next up on this list is germanium. Germanium isn't mined by itself, but is instead a byproduct of zinc mining. It's used in many electronic-related products, such as semiconductors, infrared technology, fiber optic cables, and solar cells. It's awfully similar to silicon, and rightfully so, as silicon and germanium are in the same group of elements on the periodic table, the metalloids. It's also quite rare, occurring at only 1.5 parts per million in the Earth's crust. Germanium, just like arsenic and antimony, has a medium-level melting point, with a melting point of 1,721 degrees Fahrenheit or 938.2 degrees Celsius. Next on this list is the first of the noble metals, silver. But, believe it or not, for a precious metal, silver is actually fairly cheap, selling for only $23 an ounce. For comparison, platinum costs $958 per ounce, while gold costs even more at $1,789 an ounce. Silver is part of a group consisting of four main valuable metals, with the other three being platinum, gold, and palladium, and I'll get to the other three further down this list in future videos. Silver's melting point isn't far off from germanium's, with a melting point of 1,763 degrees Fahrenheit or 961.8 degrees Celsius. Next up on this list is the sixth rarest non-radioactive metal on Earth, gold. Well known for its good looks, value, and high price, gold is the emblem of getting rich, and for good reason. Gold has a ridiculous price tag, costing a whopping $1,789 for a single ounce. That also makes it the fourth most expensive metal on Earth, only behind palladium, iridium, and rhodium. Gold is also practically indestructible, as while it can be dissolved or melted, it cannot be burnt, is resistant to corrosion, and doesn't tarnish. Gold has a medium-level melting point, melting at 1,948 degrees Fahrenheit or 1,064 degrees Celsius. Rounding out part 2 is one of the most widely used metals on Earth, copper. This red metal is an excellent conductor of heat and electricity, which is why it's perfect for cookware and electrical wires. It's also super malleable, as well as being extremely ductile, meaning it can be stretched out into thin wires extremely easily. And copper has many other properties that allow it to be one of Earth's most versatile metals. Copper is also fairly common, occurring at 70 parts per million in the Earth's crust. Copper also happens to be the last metal with a melting point below 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, with a melting point of 1,984 degrees Fahrenheit or 1,085 degrees Celsius.